Council. Council, I'm going to ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. I see none. Moving on to the approval of council minutes, and we'll start with the minutes of the meeting held on November 26th of last year. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Minutes of the council meeting held December 10th of 2019. Councillor Dunn, Councillor Thiessen, all in favor? And that's carried. The closed meeting held on December 17th of 2019. Councillor Hammond, Councillor Dunn, all in favor? And that's carried. And last, the minutes of the special council meeting, and that one was held on December 23rd of 2019. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Was there any business arising out of the minutes? I see none. Well then, Deputy Mayor, I will turn over the court of revision to you.
Thank you, the Mayor, and everybody. Just to let you know that the Mayor and Councillor Hammond do not sit on this committee. So I'm requesting that Don. Thank you, Councillor Hammond. I'm requesting a motion that the court of revision for the Drainage Act held January 14th, 2020 be opened. Councillor Hammond, Councillor Thiessen, all in favor? Carried. Is there any pecuniary interest or nature thereof in this? Okay, saying none. Items for consideration, the engineer's report, the Jefferson Wiper Drain, bridge replacement for parcels, and then the roll numbers are there. Luann? Thank you.
We have not received any appeals.
Any questions of Luann? There's a suggested recommendation there. Okay. Before we go to all in favor, is there anyone here in the audience for this? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the engineer's report for the Goral Drain new drain petition.
Before we get into the appeal, I would like Halliday to speak to a proposed assessment schedule that's attached in your agenda.
Okay.
Good evening. After the meeting to consider the report, we did notice there was an error in the schedule, and we have corrected that, and it's the revised for Court of Revision December 4th, 2019 schedule. On the drainage plan, we had shown a revised line for the approximate limit of drainage area for parcel number 443, but did not reflect that decrease in area in the schedule, so that adjustment has been made now.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Luann, you want to discuss about a new drain?
So as far as the minutes go, we'd like to reflect that the schedule of assessment dated October 3rd and presented at the court tonight be included in your resolution of the committee tonight. We'll move on to the appeal received from Renzio and Nancy Esposito dated January 3rd. What they're asking the court is that they be removed from the assessment schedule due to several reasons why they do not have outlet to the drain, nor do they have a downspouts, rear yard drainage, or an actual pipe connection to this drain. I will let Halliday explain her reasoning behind that.
Thank you.
So I've reviewed their appeal, and I have the following comments. Item 1 was that our property does not have an outlet connection. The elevation of 421 Seacliff Drive West is higher than the road. Water from this property will reach the catch basins on Seacliff Drive via overland flow. There's a catch basin located immediately east of the driveway of 413 Seacliff Drive, and there's a catch basin at the western limit of 421. These catch basins are connected to storm sewers that outlet into the Goral Drain. Item 2, there is no rear yard drainage. The entire watershed of the Goral Drain generally drains in a easterly manner to the open drain. And although there is no rear yard drainage, the water does tend to make its way to the road to reach the catch basins, which then outlet into the drain. Our downspouts are not connected anywhere, they are just on the surface. Water from these downspouts flows overland to the catch basins. Item number 4, the properties around us are higher than ours. We are a low point, which means other properties drain onto our property. That is potentially the case. However, the elevation of 421 is above that of the road, and the western portion of 421 drains westerly through a private drain and swale that exists on the neighboring property, and that swale also connects to the road catch basin. In regards to municipal number 413, this drain provides a legal outlet. So this parcel is a low spot, but this drain provides a legal outlet. So if the owners can provide a soil study to show that all water percolates away, they could certainly, we could review their inclusion in the assessment schedule for the Goral drain. But as it stands now, I would recommend their inclusion in the watershed because this does provide a legal outlet for their water.
Okay, thank you. So, committee, we have before us an appeal. How would you like to deal with it from the Espositos? Would you like to have them talk, or you want more information, or you want to listen to them?
Can you ask Luann or Holiday if we mentioned the revised assessment schedule? That was the revised that was circulated, or they revised it since?
Okay. So while they're coming up to talk, Luann, the revised assessment schedule, is that current? Do we have it, or was it revised after the copy we've got?
Sorry, the copy you have as part of the agenda is the revised copy.
Mr. and Mrs. Esposito. We can't hear you. You have to come to the mic, please.
She didn't really answer the question. She said council has a revised version. We're asking to the public or was it circulated by
But-
mail?
I don't know how that works. If our spouts are on top of the grass, we're not connected anywhere. How's that making any sense? I mean, the greenhouses behind us used to drain on us and ended up in our basement. Now they're gone, and we have some spouts at the front. How can that make it all the way to the road? Like, we sit far back from the road, very far. It's not making any sense. We're not connected to anything. We have 2 sun pumps at our house. That's what takes care of our water. I don't understand that. I mean,
Okay, I think we've heard that already, what you've said, so, I mean, that's...
I know, but
So, but for clarification now, the new assessment schedule we have, does the public have that new assessment schedule also?
Yes, December 18th, everyone was circulated, and if you look at the top right-hand corner of the notice, it says October 3rd, 2019, revised for Court of Revision, December 4th.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask, just, I mean, since we are doing this now, kind of privacy, we just have roll numbers there and stuff for the upcoming one. What's their assessment?
They own 2 parcels. Parcel number 530-20502, and the total assessment for that parcel is $2,890. The second parcel is 530-20505, and the assessment is $2,225. Both considered residential lots, therefore do not gain the OMAFRA grant.
Okay, thank you. Board? Tim? Councilor Wilkelson?
Well, I don't think Mrs. Esposito got an answer to her question, though, and I just want Holiday to confirm for me. From the way that I understood it, Holiday, you're saying she's concerned, or where she's confused is just because the water goes on top of her property, but you're saying that the water from the property eventually makes its way to to the catch basins, correct? And that provides for them to have a legal outlet at that point, correct?
Correct, yes. So the residence on 421 is at an elevation that's higher than the road. So their front yard slopes downwards toward the road, and at the west limit of their property, there's a catch basin. And there's also catch basins farther to the east of their property. So the water can flow down the hill, a small hill, from their house to the road and enter into that catch basin.
I get you. I get you. I just wanted to make sure that Mrs. Esposito is, aware of the reasons here that Holiday explained.
Luann?
I will add, even if they don't have a direct connection, that we are now giving them that legal outlet to have a direct connection. Some pump does not take away water. Some pump takes water from your basement drains and drains it onto your land. That water then needs to go somewhere. So it's probably seeping into the county existing roadside tile drain.
Drained it into the land.
From the land into the county tile drain.
How come Floral One behind us then, or One Floral, whatever they're called, how come they don't have a thing on this? They drain behind us onto us. It's their water that's going to the catch basin, not ours. Because we're just a house and they're a farm, and they drain onto us. And I was told that they're not connected to this drain. I'm thinking, how are they not connected and we are? We haven't, our spots are on top of the water, on top of the grass.
I think we'll have Luann answer that question first.
There's another catch base on 413 in the corner of our property there, and there's a greenhouse in the back. I don't know who owns it. Used to be, there's a new owner there. I don't know, but all that greenhouse water goes into that catch basin. It goes into the Gorel drain, and I don't think I'm responsible for that. They need to find another way to move their water instead of using the drain in the front.
Luann?
And I agree. During our review with this was reviewed. Peralta Engineering is the engineer of record on One Floral's property. We are currently doing some major work over on their property on the Judson Morris drain, and it's my understanding when they do development directly behind these houses, they then have to take the water into consideration into the site plan approval. Currently, because there was nothing going on, we couldn't control under site plan approval their water, but Peralta's office will be looking at that, and the water will be taken care of through the Judson Morris drain, which is at the back of the property.
Okay. Councilor Thiessen?
So, Luann, you're saying that when they do the work, the land will be sloped away from the Esposito's property?
Not that it's going to be sloped, but it will be taken care of by way of surface tile drainage and catch basins to take it to the north.
Okay, so then that begs the question, though, that if it has been currently draining this way, why would it not have been put into the report?
Because these reports are going on at the same time, the engineer requested that we not include them, because then we'd have to hire another engineer to take them out once the other report was approved.
Okay, and in the event that that doesn't happen, we'll be sure to change this at that time?
Yes, we will.
And then they would be reassessed into here?
Exactly. Yes.
Any further questions? Is there anybody, I guess you want to deal with one at a time here, this for now, or you want to hear if there's anybody else in the audience that has not put a request in or appeal but would like to be heard? Anybody in the audience want to talk about the Gorel drain that hasn't put in to be a delegation? Seeing none. The questions are done. What would you like to do, Councillor Hammond?
Deputy Mayor, thank you. I'm sure the Espositos understand that, and we're sympathetic towards the fact that you don't think that you're entitled to the assessment due to the fact that a lot of your water you don't think goes to that drain, but we have to rely heavily on the engineer's report that Holiday given, as well as our own engineering staff through Luann, and if they say that there is water going into that drain, then we have to assume, from your property, that we have to assume that it is.
Councillor Thiessen?
the water always has to go somewhere, but I guess the onus is now back on you folks. If you feel that it is infiltrating into the ground and it is a true infiltration, you may have to hire your own engineer to prove that. Percolation would be the only other way, straight down, for that water to get away. So it must be going somewhere. You can maybe look at that, but I think as far as tonight, we have to assume that the water is going somewhere, and we have to go by these assessments.
Okay, so, Councilor Wilkins, anything? So if there's no questions there, what is the committee's wish? You either are going to grant the appeal or dismiss the appeal based on what you've heard. Councilor Hammond,
I'd make a recommendation, we dismiss the appeal.
seconder. Councilor Wilkinson, any questions on that? All in favor? Carried. So the recommendation is before you also. If you want to read it, the schedule of assessments outlining the engineer's report, October 3rd, to provide construction of a new drain works of the Goral Drain Municipality of Leamington and the County of Essex in accordance with bylaws 7119 be confirmed. Moved by Councilor Thiessen, second by Councilor Hammond. All in favor? Carried. Need now to make a motion that we close the quarter revisions. Councilor Thiessen, Councilor Wilkinson, all in favor? It's closed. You had the chance. I asked. The meeting's done. This section is done. No, I asked if there's any questions out there, and nobody applied, so we went into our motion then already, so. Did you want to talk with Luann or something on your own afterwards? Not in here. Oh, there you can. Mayor, I'd like to turn it back to you now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll move on to reports of staff public meeting first. And this public meeting is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for application number 205-419 and 429 Mercy Road 8. So I believe that's Ms. Truax.
Thank you, Mayor McDonald, members of council. This is the public meeting for consideration of a zoning bylaw amendment for the two severed residential properties at 419 and 429 Mercia Road 8. These properties have been recently purchased and consolidated with the abutting vacant farm parcel and are intended to be developed as part of a new greenhouse operation. The residential properties as well as the farm are designated agricultural in the OP. The residential lots are currently zoned A5, and that permits residential uses only. The zoning amendment application has been brought forward with a site plan application for the development of a 32-acre greenhouse farm, including a new service building and bunkhouse on site. The zoning amendment will change the zone of the residential lots that are shown on map 13 of the zoning bylaw from A5 to A1. It's considered a housekeeping amendment in nature only. There are no changes that are being proposed to the overall A1 zone of the farm. The A1 zoning will allow the applicant to develop the property to be used as a greenhouse operation. As noted, the owner has submitted a site plan application, SBC 1419, to allow for the development of Phase 1 of the greenhouse. Council has been provided with a copy of the site plan that's currently being reviewed. That was attached to the report. At this time, the site plan drawings are being revised and finalized by the applicant. Applications have been submitted to IRCA for review and for the issuance of the required IRCA permit to construct on regulated lands. The applicant must complete the conditions of 2 lot additions, which were granted by the Committee of Adjustment in September of 2019. Pending the finalization of those lot additions, the applicant's lawyer will be required to forward the revised legal descriptions for the entire consolidated farm property, which includes the 2 lots that are subject to the application we're considering this evening. And then finally, with all of that information, the standard agreement will be drafted by staff pending receiving final drawings, legal descriptions. In consideration of the zoning amendment before council this evening, there were no concerns received from internal departments. Written comments were received from IRCA. They noted that the properties are regulated, but that there were no concerns with the zoning application. Administration is in a position It's the opinion of administration that the zoning amendment application is consistent with the PPS. It conforms to the agricultural land use policies of the County OP and Leamington OP, as it encourages the long-term protection of agricultural lands. It promotes and protects the future viability and flexibility of agricultural uses, and it eliminates a non-farm use from the agricultural area. Pending any comments from the public or the applicant, administration is in a position to recommend approval to change the zoning of the lands from A5 to A1, and if no concerns are raised by the public this evening that require a further staff report be brought forward, it is recommended that bylaw 0120 be forwarded to council for consideration this evening.
Thank you, Danielle. Council, do you have any questions of administration? Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Danielle, these houses are going to be moved on to the property. Can they be used as bunkhouses?
So it's my understanding that 429, so it's the larger of the teeth that have been taken out of the farm, it's likely already demolished or in process of being demolished. Accessory buildings, pool, that's part of the overall driveway and transport truck area for the greenhouse operation. We've asked the same of the applicant of 419. At this time, they're unsure what will happen to the existing house. The previous owners are still in it. But once it's consolidated with the farm, the building can be used as a dwelling, often for a grower. It can be converted through a change of use permit to be used for on-site farm help dwelling, which is a permitted use. So it could be used to accommodate additional workers or used as a single detached dwelling on that farm.
Anyone else? Danielle, is there anything outstanding on this, or is this ready to go to the next step?
The zoning is for just the farm, so we have a lot addition that's outstanding.
Okay.
And that deals with the portion of the farm fronting on County Road 14. It was transferred to the abutting Vine Fresh farm. Also, Vine Fresh gave a lot addition from their farm to Lebo Farm. That's the area of the stormwater pond, so very important that lot addition is completed, so those two items. The applicant has submitted their application to IRCA. It's under review, so that's required, that issuance. And then just they are working on some final revisions to the plans, just minor items to the site plan. Once we have those final plans for final approval, and then all of the legal things that come in order.
Okay, great, thank you. And with that, I will ask if the applicant or the agent would like to speak. Ms.
Your
Lassen.
Worship, through to council, note this is a straightforward rezoning. Your Worship, through to Councillor Dunn, 429, just to reiterate what Danielle said, 429 is right in the center of the activities. It will be absolutely gone if it's not already gone. 419, I think at this point they're going to keep it for a grower. But it's questionable.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this at all? I see no one. I mean, no one wishing to speak to this. So, council, moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you both. So now we have reports of staff and delegations, and tonight our delegation is the Independent Electricity System Operator, and Mr. Terry Young is here to present. So we need both your names, if you don't mind.
Sure, thank you. My name is Terry Young. I'm a Vice President with the Independent Electricity System Operator, and I'm joined by my colleague Susan Harrison, who is in the regional and community engagement area. So thank you very much for letting us come and present tonight. I just wanted to, in the presentation, the brief one, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the IESO is working with the community to address electricity needs in the Leamington area. What's really unique to me, a couple of things when we look at the area and what we're seeing, is really the growth that we're seeing in the electricity area, or in electricity in this area. but more importantly to us is the responsiveness and the engagement of this community in trying to address those needs. I think it's quite unique, and we're quite appreciative of the work that's occurred at the community level. As we've looked to address the needs. So, in my presentation today, I want to talk a little bit about. I want to talk a little bit about those needs and what we're doing to address those, but as well talk a little bit about what we're seeing across the province. So, from an IESO, who we are is we essentially operate the province's electricity grid, so the transmission grid. We manage the operations across that. We plan for what the demand for electricity is from 5 minutes to the next 20 years. If you were to come to our control center just west of Toronto, what you'd see is that we track demand constantly, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, or in this case, this year, 366 days a year. And then what we do is we work with generators and others to make sure that there is enough electricity to meet that demand. So we will be in the next few weeks putting out a report that looks at what demand for electricity is going to be or expected to be over the next 20 years and what some of those options are to meet that. We also are at a time where the electricity sector is changing quite significantly. If you think about what's happened in the last decade, the type of electricity we're using has changed, the way we consume electricity is changing, and we expect that change will continue over the next decade as well. So we're working to stay on top of that change and in fact enable some of the innovation we're seeing to help us reliably and efficiently meet electricity needs across the province. We're also working with communities like Leamington to make sure that they have a say in how their and what their needs are, how those needs are met. And I think for us, Leamington is a really great case study for us to use as we work with communities across Ontario. And so, again, I quite appreciative of what we've seen here, and I want to touch a little bit on that. We also run the province's conservation program, so we enable energy efficiency across the province through incentives to make industries and businesses more energy efficient. If you look at the system across the province, and this slide shows the different resource types that we have, the different mixes of electricity, we are, if you look at the different sources that we have, this is gives you a picture of all of the megawatts that are installed. Nuclear is really the workhorse, if you will. So about 60% of our power is supplied by nuclear. 25% is supplied by water, and then the remaining is supplied by natural gas, by wind, by solar, and biomass and other types. Ontario is quite fortunate in that 94% of the electricity that is generated here is non-carbon emitting, and we have one of the cleanest systems in North America, if not the world. Over the last decade, the coal facilities were taking out of service, and as you see, replaced by what you have right here. If you look at the demands for electricity, over the next 5 years, what we're seeing is that demand for electricity is relatively flat in terms of what we're seeing with respect to any increase at all. Some of that increase will be largely driven by what I would call modest growth in the residential, commercial, and agricultural sector. And what you will see as well when we release our planning outlook is that we largely have enough energy across the province to meet those needs. As we look at the middle of this decade, we see some need emerging. but largely with the resources that we have already in place, we are quite confident of the ability to meet that. That's not necessarily the case in specific areas in the province, so while we're seeing very little increase across the province as a whole, that in areas like Leamington, you're seeing quite a different story. You're seeing, as it says here, a doubling of increase in demand for electricity in the Windsor-Essex area, and that what we're looking at specifically in Kingsville and Leamington is approximately 1,300 megawatts, a need emerging for that. It's driven by the what you're seeing in the agricultural sector here, the growth in greenhouse, the growth in cannabis. And to give you a sense of this, if you look at 1 acre of cannabis greenhouse, it's equal to approximately 1 megawatt of demand. If you look at the greenhouse, it's not as significant, but still 2 acres of greenhouse demand equals 1 megawatt. So when you look at what's happening here, and you really do see the impact of the agricultural growth and its impact on the electricity sector. So we have been working with the community for a few years now to try to understand both what's creating that demand and then work with the community to get their input on how that demand can be met. So we created a local advisory committee comprised of key stakeholders and community representatives, including the greenhouse sector. We also connected with a broader audience of actually about 600 people that provided input in terms of how that demand should be met. And then we every 5 years we look at regions in Ontario. Ontario's broken up into 21 different regions, and we create a planning process every 5 years. We just produced the report for the Windsor-Essex area in September of last year, and again, if you read that report, it speaks to the demand that we're seeing, and in terms of how we're going to meet that demand, we've come up with I think pretty, again, unique approaches to meeting that demand. It's a combination of new infrastructure. It's a combination of energy efficiency initiatives. And we're also looking at new innovative approaches to how we're going to address that as well. So if I look at specifically on the transmission infrastructure, we are working with Hydro One, so we've asked Hydro One to make some upgrades to a switching station in the area and to develop a new transmission line which will meet the bulk of this the growth in electricity demand. So that the new switching station they're doing is scheduled for 2022, and then the new 230 kilovolt Chatham to Lakeshore transmission line will follow. So there's still a few years away from having that infrastructure put in place to meet that anticipated need. So we've also been working with the greenhouse sector here and in the Chatham area to see what we can do to mitigate some of that increase. And so we've been looking at particular at lighting and in LED lighting in particular, to really cut down on that expected electricity demand. And we've introduced new pilot projects for greenhouses here and greenhouses in the Chatham area, and looking at incentives that will cover 30% of project costs associated with lighting. And we think that this will have a significant impact on reducing the actual amount of electricity that is used in the area. So it will help to mitigate some of this, and it will help to address some of these needs as we are waiting for that transmission infrastructure to develop. We do, as I said, conservation programs for the province. We have a number of programs in place to help customers customers, residential, or not, pardon me, not residential, commercial and industrial, and municipalities actually, to help them reduce their electricity use. We did do a municipal study last year and looked at energy efficiency in the wastewater treatment and water treatment plants in municipalities, and again, found fairly significant savings opportunities for municipalities to use. And I would encourage Leamington to have a look at some of this to see what they can do in terms of reducing their costs associated with wastewater treatment and lighting, et cetera. We're also, just a few more pieces of information to cover. Clearly, we do understand the need to reduce costs. And we have done a lot, I would say, in the last 18 months to bring costs down. We've made some changes to the conservation programs that we had and significantly cut costs. We have canceled over 700 contracts for renewable energy projects that were terminated in the early stages of development. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a fairly good supply of electricity available to us, and so we were able to terminate 750 contracts because the power is not needed at this point in time. And then we're also looking at other changes in a program that we call Market Renewal, where the system that we are using to procure new resources and dispatch the resources to meet the demand is probably about 20 years old, or just over 20 years old, and we see a way of making some improvements that will result in, as this slide says, over $800 million in savings. So we're doing a lot, working with stakeholders and others across the province to look where we can to reduce electricity costs. The last slide I'll leave you with is a new initiative that we have, which is a regional electricity network. We recognize that communities across Ontario are very unique. What you're seeing in Leamington is not necessarily what you're seeing in Thunder Bay or what you're seeing in Ottawa, or even what you're seeing in Kingston. And so we have created 5 regional electricity networks where we're trying to get members of the community who are interested and having a continuous dialogue with them, working throughout the year to provide their information to them so that they can better understand some of the challenges that we and others have in the electricity sector, and try to understand where their needs are and what works for them with respect to meeting those needs. And then we also annually will have forums where we gather interested individuals in the 5 areas across the province, hold forums. In this area, the southwest area, our next one is March 24th, and it's in Cambridge, Ontario. So lots of interesting, I think, things going on in the sector. I'm a bit of an electricity geek, so let's take that from perspective of someone who loves this very much. But there is a lot of change, and so what we're trying to do is get around to communities across the Ontario, meeting with councils like yourself at a high level, making you aware of some of the changes that are taking, what we're doing to manage some of those changes, and the ability of communities like yourself to work with us to help address your needs. So with that, I'll conclude, and happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Terry. Council, questions. We'll start with you, Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mayor. Terry, being an electrical geek, as you admitted to, you had indicated that the cannabis industry uses 1 megawatt of power for every acre. What does that relate to in terms of the average home? How many average homes would it take to use 1 megawatt of power?
So if you think about it, a home uses about 750 kilowatt hours. I mean, it's quite impactful. You look at some of what's happening too. We're seeing, almost 1,000% increase in electricity that the cannabis sector is expected to use over the next 5 years. Cannabis and greenhouse, actually, in indoor agricultural greenhouse, it is one of those sectors that stands out in terms of that increase in demand. We've seen a lot of energy intensive industries become more energy efficient, and that increase in demand has leveled off. But given the growth that we're seeing in the cannabis and in the greenhouse sector, and you come to Leamington and you just drive down Highway 77 and you see what I'm talking about, so I think that this is again one of those sectors that's really affecting, particularly in areas like Leamington, the electricity growth.
May I have one more? Thank you. And Terry, you showed a graph that indicated how much power is being used in each different or generated by each different area. I missed the one with respect to wind power.
So in wind power, what we have is wind power probably looks at or contributes about 8% of the province's supply. Actually, between wind and solar, it's about 8%, and that's connected to the transmission grid. The slide that I showed, and I can go back to it.
I did get the solar at 1%, but I missed the wind.
The wind is,
it says 12, yeah.
Yeah, so 4,500 megawatts of wind connected. So you think about that, we have about 35,000 megawatts connected to the transmission system, of which the 4,500 is wind.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Thiessen.
Just a question about the program to switch over to LED. Is that for new and for converting, say, the high pressure sodium?
Yeah, it's not just new facilities, it's if you are an
existing
existing facility and you're converting as well.
Okay, good, thank you.
So with that program, are you actively marketing that to the greenhouse industry? And the reason I ask is a couple of us, my colleagues and I, visited a particular greenhouse on Friday, and we asked them about LED, and they said it was cost prohibitive. So I'm wondering if it needs to be marketed perhaps a little bit more vigorously, because we certainly would like to see some of the reduction in the light emissions.
So yes, we are, but I will tell you that we just actually introduced this program about a month ago.
Okay.
So we have been working with the Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers to make sure that they're aware of this. But it is really in its infancy, so the word is starting to get out.
Good.
But it is obviously taking some time to get that message out, given your experience on Friday.
Good. Well, and 30% is a pretty good kick. So that's good. Now, I wanted to ask you as well, or maybe more than ask, is make a statement. You commented on the corridor, the greenhouse corridor of Highway 77, and we've certainly had lots of comments on the aesthetics, the lack of aesthetic appeal to the size of the really large poles. Sorry, I think we've had a little uptick here in our volume. Anyway, do they have to, and will they always remain that tall, that high, that? I realize there's quite a bit of difference or distance between the different levels of the wires. Is that something that will always be there? Is there ever a chance to go underground? You have to admit, I believe my fellow councillors, myself, have certainly heard complaints about what it has done to some of the concession roads that were kind of quaint country roads and now have these massive poles. We realize the need and all that, but it is certainly something that does come up in conversation.
I think it really depends on the who owns that wire, if you will, the local distribution company, and you will see some underground wires in urban centers in different jurisdictions. I know, from my past experience in working with Hydro One, and I remember 20 years ago when the ice storm, and the question in Eastern Ontario was, why don't you bury those lines, right? It is a fairly costly proposal, and I know that, some communities have looked at it, some local distribution companies have looked at it. So there is a cost equation associated with that. It then eventually has to get passed on to customers as well.
Okay, great. If there are no further questions, we thank you both for coming. Thank you for bringing us up to speed on the growth, and we're certainly aware of the growth and appreciative of the growth in the greenhouse industry, but the impacts and how it does benefits us all in different ways. So thank you both very much for taking the time and the opportunity to come and fill us in.
Thank you, and again, thank you to the community because it has been as I said, we use this community as an example of the way to engage and the way to be involved in addressing needs.
Great, thank you. Oh, sorry, Terry, both you and Susan, we have one more person who's a little bit, do you have a question? Which was? Oh, the marketing. Okay, we're good. Thank you both again, we appreciate it. So moving on to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure, the ICIP Green Stream Grant application. Mr. Sharon.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation before Council tonight is that Council approve an application to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, or ICIP Green Stream, for the sewer separation project of Audrey, Margaret, Claire, Jane, and a portion of Shirk Streets. For this particular funding program that I'll speak to more later in the report, eligible asset types include drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. Eligible project types include the rehabilitation, replacement, upgrade, or renewal of that work. So under this program, each applicant can submit a maximum of one project, and projects will be assessed by the provincial government and then nominated to the federal government for review and approval. These applications are due to the province on January 22nd of 2020. And the province estimates that they will notify applicants that their project has been selected for nomination, hopefully by the winter of 2020, and we're looking to the spring of 2020 for federal approval. So these particular project guidelines have some pretty fast turnaround timelines, which is promising. These projects will be assessed based on the critical health and or safety risk aspects of the project, the technical merits of the project, and the funding need of the proposed project. And the maximum total eligible project cost for a single applicant is $3 million. Of that $3 million, the federal government will contribute a maximum of 40% of $3 million, the provincial government a maximum of 33.33%, and then that leaves a required contribution of the $3 million of 26.67% to the municipality. I did want to note that while the 40% federal cap includes all federal contribution, we can use other provincial funding mechanisms, such as the ICIF program, to pay for the municipal portion. And total eligible project costs are only eligible if they're incurred after the project has been approved by the federal government, and total costs must be incurred by December 31st of 2026. So we have some time to complete the project. So some background on the program itself. We're recommending to Council that we submit an application for the sewer separation of Margaret, Claire, Jane, and Audrey, as I mentioned earlier. This area is currently serviced by a combination sewer. It essentially drains southward down Shirk Street to the Seacliff trunk sewer as combination sewage, and then enters that trunk sewer, heads easterly to the plant, and is treated at the plant. Separating this particular sewer has two main objectives. First, like all of our sewer separation projects, it separates storm and sanitary sewage. This is important because during significant storm events, the volume of storm sewage often that enters these combined sewer systems is such that the system simply can't deal with that volume, and there's an inevitable overflows, and those overflows end up into our storm sewers and then inevitably end up into the lake. So fundamentally, separating sewers has a lot of environmental benefit. The other thing that this particular sewer separation does is it brings us one step closer, and so long as we proceed as the capital plan is currently laid out to council, this project will be the last sewer separation project that we do in that area that is serviced by the Seacliff trunk sewer. So that is strategic, and this is something that that we talked about in strategic planning a few years ago and laid out this plan. Because once the Seacliff trunk sewer is fully separated, then we are able to expand sanitary servicing to the west. So currently, the extent of our servicing area is right near Shirk Street. We'll be able to look west, pick up all of the current properties in the future that are on septic systems, near shore septic systems, and it will also open up a lot of land for future development. Currently, developers are not allowed to build new subdivisions, new developments on combined sewer systems. So projects can have subcomponents related to new construction, but the majority of the work must be rehabilitation or renewal. So those subcomponents could be a new road surface. If you need to tear up the road in order to replace the sewer, you can put that road back. Those costs would be covered. But if you also decided while you were there that you were going to expand the road, add another lane, or improve the area, those costs would not be eligible. That's important to consider because as administration was going through our eligible projects, there were a number of projects that are important to the community, like the Northeast Trunk Sewer as an example, and some other new infrastructure projects that are important, but we're not able to submit an application for those. The 2020 estimated cost of this entire project is $6.5 million. You heard me speak earlier that there's a $3 million project cap. Projects can go above the $3 million cap. It is simply that the funding percentage that is noted as the capped percentage is that particular percentage, so 40% of $3 million. So we can go well above that in our total project costs. It is simply that the federal government will pay no more than 40% of $3 million. The provincial government will pay no more than 33% of that $4 million. This particular project has already been identified in our 5-year capital plan in the sewer, engineering, and water budgets. Currently, we have it earmarked for 2021 and 2022. Our 5-year capital plan is a fully funded 5-year capital plan currently. So if this particular project is approved for funding, essentially what this will allow us to do is free up approximately $2.2 million worth of funding that we could then reallocate to other core infrastructure projects at the discretion of council. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Alan. Geez, sorry, Rob. Before I open it up to council, Rob, have you counted the number of properties that would be paying into this, like William and Gladstone and all of those? Does it say in there 55? I didn't. Oh, do you think it's 55? Does that sound reasonable?
It's more.
I just wondered what the catchment, if you will, of that is. Just wondering for, we're always guessing at what the end result will be dollar-wise for our residents. That's all I was thinking of. And you don't have to figure it out right now. Let me know, or let council know.
Your Worship, forgive me, I asked that exact same question of Alan. He gave me the number. I know that we anticipate the cost to be in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $10,000, which is very typical. The other important aspect is that council does have a bylaw that essentially limits, and the reason we often see the $8,000 to $10,000 number, come through on average is that council does have a bylaw that limits the exposure of residents for these sewer separation projects. We essentially cap the per meter cost for the sewer, and we cap the connection cost. So the exposure is somewhat limited. So if we were doing a complicated sewer separation project in town and costs were driven up, council, this has been a policy of council for at least 2 decades, basically accepted the fact that in order to have general fairness, that they were going to cap the exposure of residents for that second sewer.
Okay, I know there's at least one person here in the audience because of this. So I just want to, again, then ask Finance to tell us again how the structuring of the repayment will be. Sorry, there is sensitivity here going on here tonight. If you don't mind, Laura, just to put it out, because I know there'll be questions or phone calls perhaps, so if we just put it out now, it might keep those to a minimum.
Certainly, through you, Mayor McDonald. So typically, the way that we offer debenturing to residents or property owners that are assessed within a sewer separation project like this is once the project is completed, it will come back to council for final assessment. Typically, we give about 60 days for the landowners to decide whether or not they will debenture or pay in full. And they have that option. There is a $100 admin fee if they choose to debenture with the municipality, and that rate is established by the Infrastructure Ontario rate plus 2%, which is consistent with what we do with the drainage. Failure to make any payment to the municipality, the charges are automatically rolled to their taxes and then would become due and payable at that time.
And the debenturing timeline is typically over the 10 years as well, right? The opportunity to pay via your taxes over 10 years. This is annoying, sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, thank you very much. So, council, questions of Mr. Sharon? Councilor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Rob. Rob, we did the big fix on Shirk Street, if I recall, within the last 5 years, correct? That was the big repair. I'm just wondering, a project like this size, how's it going to impact our Shirk Street? Is that going to be a total rehaul of Shirk Street again, if this happens?
You know, that's a great question, Councillor. And forgive me, Alan's not here tonight. And we haven't gone into the detailed design of it. Likely there will be impact on Shirk from Ellison southward, where it's highlighted there, because there currently is not a storm sewer servicing through there. Though my anticipation would be that we would essentially lose a lane of traffic, dig up a lane, lay the storm sewer, and essentially rebuild it, keeping the curbs in place, and then put the surface back on.
So with that, council, I'll ask your wishes. Councillor Hammond. Oh, yes, I did have you next. I apologize. I need one of those things that puts you in the queue.
Thank you. Rob, we've been pretty successful with grant applications in the past, and there's no reason to think that isn't going to continue. But what happens in the event that we're not successful in getting that? Do we still move forward with this project?
Through your worship, Councillor, as it sits now, that is the 5-year plan that Council will see in a couple weeks when we go through budget. It is a fully funded plan. It takes a lot of time and effort on an annual basis to put all those pieces together and to identify the funding sources. Hasn't always been that way. Sometimes plans aren't fully funded, so the future costs to do these projects haven't been identified. But over the last few years, we didn't feel that was a responsible way in which to bring the plan to council. And so, subject to council accepting the plan, it's currently fully funded, so we would expect that the project would move forward in 2021, 2022.
Councillor Dunn.
To you, Madam Mayor. Rob, with the streets like Audrey, Jane Street, Claire and Margaret, with Coronation and how it got downsized, the street, it actually shrunk. Are we going to have the bump outs and the shrinking of the sizes of the streets? I know there's a standard you use for so many cars, but with the parking, as I've expressed before. Just curious, are we gonna shrink the streets down, and the bump outs and?
Yes, well, through your worship, we have not gone into detailed design, Councillor. Though, we will be looking at the current makeup of the streets and, where required, bringing it to more of a modern standard. We're certainly, recognize both some of the benefits and some of the challenges that have come along with the more recent street designs. Coronation, I think, was a good example of a compromise in meeting some objectives while also recognizing, the functionality of the road. Certainly, if sidewalks don't exist currently, sidewalks will be something that will be considered. But any of those design, we'll go to public information sessions, we'll talk to the public. If there's any significant design changes that are going to impact the residents, it's certainly a discussion that we'll bring to council.
And with that, I'll ask council again what the wishes are. Moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded by Councillor Hammond. All in favor? And that's carried. I don't know if you saw Brenda's note, but if anyone has adjusted the volume on your, yeah, you're not supposed to, that's why it's going up and down. Keep your volume off. It's been adjusted by IT. That's why it's giving us irregular, if you don't mind. Thank you. So moving on to the grant requests, Ms. Roach.
Thank you, Mayor McDonald. I'm confident that Council is aware of the grants to nonprofit process. The Municipal Act permits Council to provide grants to nonprofit organizations for any purpose that Council deems is in the best interest of the municipality. The value of grants requests has grown exponentially over the last 4 years, while the municipal tax rate has increased about 1.8% as outlined in my report. In 2019, Leamington Council spent about 20% of the budget meeting discussing 0.6% or $170,000 of general tax levy monies. In an effort to streamline the grant process and allow for Council to more thoroughly discuss and exclusively focus on the 2020 operating and capital budgets, administration is recommending that Council tonight approve an amount that would be included in the draft 2020 budget. Following budget discussions, all applicants will be invited to a special meeting of Council to be held in February to make their presentations. It would be at that time that Council would determine the distribution of that amount to each organization. Administration is recommending that amount be $175,000, as this represents about a 2.8% increase over prior years and will allow Council to consider providing funding to long-standing organizations at similar levels to prior years. The merits and values of all of these applicants are not in question. They all bring value to the Leamington community and are great organizations. There will always be competing priorities, though, for every levied tax dollar, whether that be for municipal services offered, the level of service provided, investment in capital, sustaining our annual capital operations, life cycle replacement to ease the large deficit in the asset management plan, as well as responsible and prudent fiscal spending. Administration also recognizes that the current policy is vague, does not provide any evaluation criteria or guidance when Council considers who should be provided funding and at what level. So as such, administration is seeking Council's direction to review and revise the policy to simplify the grant process. A review of neighboring municipalities demonstrates a wide range of Council policies in regards to nonprofit grants across the county. Some municipalities do not offer grants at all. Others follow a similar process to Leamington Council, discussing grants during budget operation or deliberations. The value of the grants, both in kind and cash, vary from $0 to $170,000 across the county, with Leamington being the highest. So if Council approves an upset limit tonight for grants, the draft 2020 budget can be finalized and the budget binders prepared for distribution next week. So the recommendations before Council this evening are that Council approve a maximum of $175,000 for grants to be included in the 2020 draft budget, And secondly, that council direct administration to review and provide recommendations to revise policy F11 requests for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Council, your wishes, opportunity to speak, opportunity to comment. Councilor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Out of this agenda, this is the one I kind of looked at the most here over the weekend. And for me, I'm not in favor of the cap being proposed here. Reason for this, I feel like we kind of handcuff ourselves, almost paint ourselves into a corner, that this rule is hanging over top of us. With each grant, well, every year when we go through the grant process, at the end of it, we always say this is one of the more difficult parts of the budget process, and it gets more and more, it gets tougher each year. The worthy causes that come before us are, they're greater, and now we're also putting in the in-kind donations. We're lumping that all into the grant process. The competition's getting fiercer every year. Each time when I look at how we're awarding grants, I say to myself, how much value is that bringing to our community? Is the way I look at it. I'm happy to assist, depending on how much value it adds to our community. There's lots of good examples. I heard you say a parade beforehand. Lots of value comes from a parade in our community. There's a ton of the Horticultural Society offers great values. We don't argue that. If we put this cap in, though, we did that at the beginning of the budget. We listened to everybody. I keep that in mind as I go through the budget book afterwards, and I'm looking for spots, that I might be able to. Let's take Complex, for example. Last year, there was a spot in there, I remember, for lobby furniture. We had 50, 80,000, something like that for the new lobby furniture in the front end. Not necessarily a huge deal for the complex when you think about the grand scheme, how much we give to the complex, for their operating budget, capital budget. But it's a huge deal for these organizations. As we're going through that budget process, I'm looking for areas that I might be able to say, I don't think the complex is not necessary there. I'll keep that for budget or I'll keep that for grants afterwards, where I do think I'm going to get more value for my money. So if that cap is hanging over top of our head, we've capped ourselves. I just don't like having it there. It hasn't been there in the past. I like that Laura brought this to our attention. I think it gives us kind of a check. It's given us a reminder that with the way things are trending here. And I think I'll try and keep that in my head as I go along, that there's 175,000 imaginary line there that I want to try and stick around. But I don't want to have it there just in case I need that extra. If I don't even know what the grants are yet. I wish we did have the budgets already so that we could maybe have a peek at this, because this is speaking just for the 2020 budget. I don't know what's there. I don't want that hanging above my head. So that's my thoughts right now. I'd like to hear the rest of the council, but right now I'm not in favor of it.
Deputy Mayor, I have you next.
Worthy Mayor, thanks. Laura, is it possible you can maybe throw out what was requested this year as opposed to other years? Because I don't mind giving to the needy. I don't want to go for profit people. I don't want to give grants out for operation budgets. I mean, there are some people that do it, but what, I think it was $390 last year. What was asked for this year?
Through you, Mayor McDonald. Last year's total requests were 328, so 328,000. This year, the requests were 393,000. I do want to say that although that's an increase of about 60,000, some have dropped off and a lot more have come on. So the purpose of this discussion tonight was not to go through the details of the grants, because those are coming and those will come as part of the process, but really just to kind of give you an idea of the number of requests, the total value of requests that have increased. And as we put our tax rate increase of 1.8% every year, if we see grants going up to the tune of 5% per year, something is being cut, as Councillor Wilkinson has indicated. I mean, it's being brought forward to council for consideration. If you would like to stay status quo, we can certainly recommend as administration, as we always have, we can invite the applicants to be part of the budget discussion. Our original discussion with all the applicants was that they would get an opportunity to present, and that's why we thought this a little bit of a change right after budget discussions would allow for council to really focus on the $60 million worth of operating and capital budgets that your administration team has worked since September to put together for you. So that's really the rationale behind it, was to allow you to spend those 3 days deliberating the vast majority of dollars that this municipality spends in a given year, and then really provide those great groups an opportunity to come to council and present their ask. Some of the asks are for-profit organizations doing things at the amphitheater. Again, great things that bring to this community, but we really need to be thinking about these are taxpayer dollars, and actually giving to for-profit organizations is against the Municipal Act, as I indicated in my report.
So, follow-up, Worthy Mayor?
Further?
Yes.
Certainly.
So this is, rounded off, $400,000 of taxpayers' money, again. And I just, talking with not the neighboring one, but the other neighboring mayor, and he had a rough time doing their budget this year because they had $35,000 in grants. And I was amazed, and I said, well, ours is like over 300,000 more than that. Well, he just couldn't believe it because you know what you're doing with that money? So I'm not saying it's not worthy, but I think if what we hear from IRCA, from county council, that the government's going to clamp down next year on handing, provincial government handing money out, I'd rather see us start something now than next year. So I'm probably going to support the recommendation.
Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too am in favor of this, the recommendation. In fact, I'm going to go one step further, that I really struggle with handing out taxpayer dollars to grant situations. To me, that almost should be something that each individual does themselves, because they can give to nonprofit organizations, and they also get a tax receipt for it. I don't know if it's our place to be giving out in these cases. And don't get me wrong, these are all, the ones that come to us are always really great projects and very important projects. But is it something that we should be deciding for the ratepayers? Again, I think we need the cap. I agree with the cap. Otherwise, we could give out 400,000. Next year, it'll be 500,000. People catch on that there's free money to be had. You'll get more and more people coming to the trough all the time. I just think that I'm in favor of limiting this, and I would welcome the discussion next year whether or not we even have a grant program.
Well, we do have some grants that we have to do, and I'm thinking in particular of the Half Century Club. So there are some that we are legislated, isn't that correct, to do. So to get rid of them in their entirety isn't feasible, but good point. Yes, certainly.
If they're legislated, then they're really not a grant. Then that would become a budget item. And there are some others that are almost in-house, that are part of well, the Art Center is one that is part of our pillars in downtown. But do we cover the building, or do we help to cover operations? And I think those are the discussions. If it's the building, maybe that needs to come into our budget and out of the grant situation.
I think that's a really good point. I think that is a conversation we do need to have at some point. I'll talk after everyone has their opportunity, but I believe Mr. Neufeld has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification on the Half Century Club, the statutory component of it isn't that we must give, but that it is a matching program with the province. So if we don't give any money, then they get nothing from the province as well. So that's where the $24,000 comes from.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Dunn, I have you next.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, I understand that the funds are getting a little tighter, especially eventually in other areas where we're experiencing and going to possibly experience more. And that causes me to be cautious with the taxpayers' dollars. But some of those investments through the grant process, Hogs for Hospice, I know the administration worked with them and gave them that grant, generates huge amounts of dollars coming into our community. So and then when you cut one out, because there's a huge opportunity, now mind you, if they come through administration, they might come to us in a different light, but those opportunities to generate huge millions of dollars into our community for the hotels and everything else that it brings, a whole event for our community, those are worthwhile events to try to take a look at. So that at first I was considering the thought of the cap, and I appreciate that, but not knowing what the grants are out there caused me a little bit of concern. I just want to be able to know what they are before, so I can make a decision that way.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think we've all brought out a lot of points, and we've indicated that we've got a lot of concerns about our grant structure. There's no doubt about it. And honestly, it looks like it's getting out of hand. You know, when you think of $98,000 of increase last year, a potential of $65,000 or $66,000 this year, it's out of hand. And excuse me. And I think we need to have some further discussion, as Councillor Thiessen alluded to, about what does fall under the grant program, what doesn't, and maybe we need to spend some time and try to realign some of those things. And because I wasn't aware that, with respect to what Mr. Neufeld said about the Half Century Club, right? I just thought, well, it was a grant that we give them for operating expenses. Little did I know that if we don't give it, they won't get their provincial funding or federal funding. So I too, coming into this, thought that maybe the right thing to do would be to cap it. Although, as Councillor Dunn alluded to, I'd like to have seen those grant requests. In my mind, it helps me go through them and say, okay, well, they got 10,000 last year, maybe we could reduce that by 3,000 or whatever, and mentally come up with a total that might come close to 175,000. I think 175,000 is a great number. Quite honestly, I think it is. But how do we get to that number? And I'm wondering if we shouldn't, a part of this is sit down when we do this in February, is to talk about some of the things that were brought forward here, about what falls under the grant structure and what doesn't, and get some perimeters around it. So moving forward, we know where we're at. And I'm really up in the air. I mean, I'm going to go with the bulk of the recommendations here as to what we do, because I think 175 is enough. But having said that, I too would like to have seen the grant requests.
Can I put my 2 cents worth in? I am putting my 2 cents worth in. I like the idea of the cap. I think that you're right, it has gotten out of hand, because I think, and when you look at it, that we're the largest amount in the county, I think it's time that we put the brakes on it. I think that we need to look at it separate from the budget. We already know that there's going to be pressure to increase the tax rate this year. And to me, this will be something we can look at separately. We already know, who's going to be coming to the table. It's been the same people that have always come to the table. We've got that rough idea. We could probably, each of us, come up with close to the numbers just on past recollection, and then know that there are a few new ones that will be coming to the table. I think working within that 175,000 limit will make the budget process easier. That ate up a big portion of our budget talks. To look at it separately, I think it's a little more efficient to say this is our cap, this is slightly more than we did last year. It's within the parameters of what we can live with. I'm sure it's already been figured into what the tax increase will be, and administration has known what our upper limit is, so we know that we'll be within what we had hoped. So if we think of increasing this by even 50,000, there will be repercussions on that increase. When we are at the top end of the county, I think that shows us that perhaps it's time to practice a little bit of restraint. I don't need to know. I haven't seen it myself, but I know who we typically give money to, and the new ones will be we'll look at them with a careful eye, and we still can adjust within that 175,000. I'm fine with that because it's that bottom line that we have to answer for. And if that impact is impacted by over generosity on our part, we'll have to answer for it. I'm good with it, to have this on a separate day where we can put in all of our energy, if you will, and all of our concentration without having the entire budget hanging over our heads. I think it's better, and again, I think it's more efficient, knowing already we need to meet these numbers. And really, when you think about it, that's really what staff does, right? They know what numbers they have to work within, and then they come back to us. They've juggled and adjusted and snipped and and pasted on and made that come in under what we want. So this, to me, is us doing the same thing on a much smaller scale. I will be supporting it because I think we've reached our limit as to what we can do with funding, grant funding, and doesn't say that next year we can't add 10,000 or 15,000. It's just, I believe this year, when we know that there's going to be an increase based on the fact that we've had our funding cut back from the province, I'm going to support it. So with that, further discussion or a motion? Or perhaps the CAO would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There are a number of reasons why we brought this forward. One is to, and I know that Ms. Roach laid this out, but just to try and bring 3 bullet points, I think 3. By setting the cap, it allows this to come outside of the budgeting process, as Laura had said. It allows us to move forward with administration, to move forward with confidence that at the end of the budgeting process, we're done. We know what the amount is. The second thing that this report does is that it says if council approves this, that administration will spend some time over the course of the next year and prior to the next call for grants, that we will come back to council with some ideas about what the grant program could look like going forward, looking for council's input in the, as I think Councillor Hammond had said, a redesign of the grant program. So this isn't just about the cap, and it's not just about who, and it's not at all about who's getting the money, but it's about giving us some time to change the process this year, which is to take it away from the overall budget day, but the applicants still get their say and get to come and make their pitch to council on under a separate program, but at least we'll have the budget number crystallized so that we can move forward. But I didn't want you to lose sight of the fact that part of this report was to say, now also administration, go away and let's look at the grant program. Let's look at what the grant program looks like in some of our neighboring municipalities. What's the impact on setting the cap at 175? And I think you also notice that within the report, Laura had indicated it's 175 or some other number. That could be set by council, even tonight. But the 175, as you know, came from a modest increase over last year's, in keeping with kind of where we're going with the increase in the tax rate, which has not yet obviously been presented or approved by council. But I didn't want you to lose sight of the fact that this also includes having a relook at how we do grants here. And maybe it also includes how do we fund some of these core programs that maybe the grant program doesn't work properly for them as well. So it's an overall look at how we move forward in the next few years.
Great, thank you. The recommendation moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Thiessen. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Thank you. Other matters for approval, there are none. Moving on to consideration of bylaws, and I'll turn that over to our clerk.
Bylaw 01-20, a bylaw to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw number 89009 for the municipality of Leamington pertaining to subject land ZBA number 205, 419 and 429 Mercia Road. Bylaw 5819, a bylaw to provide for the realignment of the DeBerg Drain in the municipality of Leamington, county of Essex. That's third reading only. Bylaw 8519, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the municipality of Leamington at its meeting held December 23rd, 2019. Bylaw 0220, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the municipality of Leamington at its meeting held January 14th, 2020.
Thank you, Brenda. Moved by, again, the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All in favor? And that's carried. Notices of motion. Again, to the clerk. Oh, Councillor Thiessen, you're reading it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So bringing forward a notice of motion, it was moved by myself and seconded by Larry Verbeek, Deputy Mayor. A notice of motion to draft a bylaw in consultation with but not limited to local residents, hunters, other municipalities, and the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters to regulate and or prohibit the discharge of firearms in defined areas of the municipality.
And we are having that discussion this evening. So, opening the floor. Deputy Mayor.
Worthy Mayor, thanks. I just want to, you're just watching this and listening it, brought it up again, and now discuss it. Why did Councillor Thiessen bring this motion forward?
Councillor Thiessen.
I'll give you the background. So this started, quite a number of months ago. There are some residents in the southeast part of Leamington that were having issues with hunters essentially trespassing, also discharging their firearms in unsafe manners. They've had pellets raining down on their in their yards, and people shooting across bodies of water and across the roadways. They had approached M&R, who said that they were basically too busy to come out and watch all the time for this happening, because by the time that somebody calls them and they get out there, the person is gone. The police services were also notified, and the issue there was that without a direct bylaw, their hands are basically tied because it's hunting and it's in M&R's lap. So by bringing in a bylaw, what is hoped is that that will give the local police enforcement as well as our bylaw officers the power to now go out and lay some charges, and also to define certain areas which are away from residential areas where you shouldn't be discharging your firearm in unsafe manners. You should never do it in an unsafe manner, but getting it away from the residential areas. So that's kind of the start of this. Going back to 1995, Mercia Township actually had a bylaw in place at that time with defined area and a number of maps, but that bylaw, looking through it, is outdated. Maps need to be redrawn, and some of the wording needs to be changed, is my belief in that. So I would just like to direct administration to maybe if we could have a look at other municipalities, and I'd like to see public meetings with interested parties, residents, hunters, sportsmen's clubs, to have input on this. This isn't something we want to do overnight and put the wrong thing into place, but it'd be good to have the discussion anyways.
Can I ask a question? So will a bylaw make it so that by the time whoever gets called will be able to catch those fellows, or will they have disappeared again just like before we had the bylaw? Are you expecting there to be different results? And I'm not against it. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of how this will improve the situation.
So whether it actually solves the real issue, I'm not sure. But now when we call police services or they call our bylaw officers, now there's a reason. Now they can act. Now they have a bylaw to go by to stand up with that says you shall not hunt in this area. It may also allow us to some of the problems too, where they were hunting off the dikes. They were actually I've had reports of them shooting birds off of pump houses which are owned by the municipality. So this may allow us then to also go out and sign it and make sure that fines are imposed.
If I may ask Ms. Orton, so Ruth, putting our bylaw officers in a position like this, and as one of them stated to me before, I went on site with my vest and my pencil. I would find that a bit of a daunting exercise, just being armed with a pencil. So is that something that is in the scope of our bylaw to do? I'd like your legal opinion, if you don't mind.
As part of the process, if council passes this motion, I would certainly do some investigation as to what other municipalities have included within the scope of their bylaw officers' duties. Our current agreement with the OPP does indicate that the OPP officers will enforce certain of the municipality's bylaw upon agreement. It would be my opinion at this point that we would want to have that agreement established rather than sending our own bylaw officers out unarmed when it is unknown as to why shots might be being fired. Although there might be the opinion that it's hunters, I wouldn't really want to send our officers into that situation without much greater knowledge and without at least the assistance of the OPP, which we have relied upon many times. But I would want to have those discussions preliminarily as well.
Okay, that sounds good. So, council, your wishes? Councillor Hammond.
I move the recommendation of looking into the bylaw. I think it's something that we've all heard these complaints, and I think it's something that we need to act on. And I think responsible hunters will understand the need for this.
Okay. Oh, we just have to vote now. There's been, excuse me, there's been a mover and a seconder. So with that, all in favor of the notice of motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Yes, clarification for the CAO.
Now that council has given that direction, I'd like to look to council for a little direction on timelines as to when you'd like to see something like this come back so that we meet the expectations.
Deputy Mayor, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, before the next nuisance goose, the Labor Day weekend.
Councillor Thiessen.
I would concur with that before the next hunting season. Well, I would, if we have it done by September, that would be a good thing.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, moving on to open session. Councillors have any comments? Deputy Mayor, comments?
Yes, today we had our Chamber of Commerce meeting, and a representative was there from the hospital, and they did make $525,000 at their gala that they had on Saturday night. So it was a great event, and there is a lot of people out there that are willing to give. So I thank you for that. Other than that, no, it's great to get back to work.
Great. I just wanted to comment on Reinvent This Space, just to let you know that we chose a winner. I think it's in the paper this week. But I wanted to comment on a couple of things. All of us were certainly on board with the Reinvent This Space. I think it was a big success in that we had 9 people that were interested and came weekly to the information learning sessions with our professionals. We had a banker, we had an accountant, we had a lawyer, a marketer, and an insurance agent. And I always like to take collective credit when it comes to good things happening, but in this case, I picked a dynamite team. They were so engaged, and they were great at teaching and mentoring the group. We ended up with 4 people submitting business plans and doing presentations. And out of that group, we picked Christine Dundas with Christine's Bakery. So we will be looking forward to an opening, I would think, in early summer. We've done our part, and I know it will be coming up again in budget, and I hope you'll consider my plug for the next time. I was interviewed today by one of the news medias, and they talked about filling an empty store, and I said, it's gone beyond that. It's gone to the point where this is about encouraging entrepreneurship. And if we can get more entrepreneurs to open businesses in our community, that's all the better for us, as a destination place, as a place to come and shop, etc. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know, I think our first one has certainly been a success. Christina had an advantage, certainly because she already had a market base, because she was in all of the festivals and markets in the surrounding area. And the others, though, were certainly heavyweight contenders. And as one of our judges said, some of them just needed a little longer cooking time. And we certainly hope that they will consider applying again and being part of the next project, because there are some solid people, solid ideas in there. And we have offered to do a debrief afterwards and give the folks that entered the final stages of the competition some pointers. And our group that is why they're so good, because they wanted to continue the mentoring. So just wanted to let you know, an initiative that was solely this council's has been a success. So with that, I'll ask if there are any statement of members, non-debatable, none, and motion to adjourn. Councillor Dunn, Councillor Hammond, all in favor, and that's carried. And with that, I'll say good night.